In my last video, I completely dismantled a motorcycle seat. I refurbished the frame and used the original cover to draft a new set of pattern pieces. Now, it's finally time to start building a new seat cover. This seat is for a friend's vintage 1973 Honda CB750. And while I want it to stay true to the character of the original motorcycle, I also wanted to add a few details of my own, starting with the seating surface. Unlike the original cover, I decided to quilt the top panel, partly because I like the look of it, but also because it gives the seat a little more visual depth, without dramatically changing its overall design. Before I could start sewing, I needed to build up the layers underneath the leather. The first layer was upholstery batting. Batting is the material that creates the raised sections between the stitch lines, giving upholstery its shape, texture, and dimensional appearance. For this project, I was able to get my hands on some 3/4 inch polyester upholstery batting. This material has a much denser feel, which should help the quilting hold its shape over time. And because it's made from polyester, it also seemed like a better choice for something that may occasionally be exposed to moisture and changing weather conditions. The only issue was, it was a little thicker than I wanted, so I carefully reduced it down to roughly 1/2 inch. Still thick enough to create a pronounced quilted effect, but not so thick that it looks bulky. For the final layer, I used a piece of fabric cut from an old fitted sheet. It might seem like an odd choice, but it serves an important purpose. The fabric helps distribute the load from the stitching, reducing the chance of the thread eventually pulling through the batting, especially in an area that will experience constant pressure and movement. Once the layers were prepared, I moved on to the leather, tracing out the quilting pattern directly onto the cowhide. For this seat, I decided to use a tuck and roll design. a style that became extremely popular through the 1950s and 60s, particularly in custom cars, motorcycles, and hot rod culture. Traditionally, tuck and roll upholstery uses a series of evenly spaced, stitched channels to create a padded and ribbed appearance. The design became popular because it was durable, comfortable, and visually distinctive. Even today, it's one of the most recognizable upholstery styles associated with vintage motorcycles. For the stitching, I'll be using a black, heavy-duty bonded nylon thread. I spent quite a bit of time thinking about thread color. The leather is still unfinished, so once it's conditioned and waxed, the color will darken significantly. And I didn't want the stitching to become the focal point. I wanted the quilting itself to stand out, not the thread. So black felt like the right choice, giving the seat a lower contrast and a more understated appearance. Before sewing the quilted lines, I decided to stitch around the edge first, partly to secure all the layers together, but also to create a defined border. a natural stopping point for the quilting pattern, something that helps frame the entire panel. From there, it was finally time to start quilting. And throughout the entire process, I worked as slowly as possible, trying to keep every stitch line straight and evenly spaced. It sounds simple, but sewing something this thick, this bulky, and this precise takes a surprising amount of concentration. A small deviation becomes very noticeable once the quilting starts repeating across the entire panel. Thankfully, my console handled the material without any complaints. Even with multiple layers of leather, batting, and fabric stacked together. And once the first few rows were complete, I finally caught a glimpse of how my finished seat might look.